Hey, so it's just turned the 10th of December 2014 in the UK, and in the US, obviously, you guys are a few hours behind us. I want to comment briefly on Time Magazine Person of the Year. This is something I've followed quite closely. I made another video about it, and I mentioned some of the people who have been nominated by Time readers around the world. Well, Time has unveiled their finalists as chosen by the editorial staff of Time magazine. Some of the names are consistent with some of the names the readers were choosing, but there's other names completely left off. So I'm going to go through the names, say who I think out of these people I believe should be the nominee, or possibly the nominee, and let you decide yourself. They're going to name the person very, very soon. Okay, the people they have shortlisted are the Ferguson protesters, the Ebola caregivers, Vladimir Putin, Taylor Swift, Jack Ma, Tim Cook, Masoud Barzani, Roger Goodall. Yeah, that's it. Those 8 people, or in the case of the first 2 groups of people. Now, of those, I think it was only Putin, the Ebola caregivers, and the Ferguson protesters who were in the top 8 of the reader's choice. Now, I appreciate that this is not, that they do make it clear that the readers don't have the final decision, but I do hope that the editorial staff take the readers into consideration. Because after all, if we're talking about influence and perception of influence, then surely that should be somewhat democratic, in the sense that there should be a perception that the more people who nominate someone, then presumably the more influential that person is. I do agree that it's, some people say that there should be no media presence whatsoever, or sorry, celebrity presence whatsoever. I don't exactly agree with that, because I think celebrities can be powerful and influential. So I don't necessarily agree it should all be politicians or CEOs. I think that would be a little bit misleading, because influence does cross into lots of different fields. So in her own way, Taylor Swift, for example, is powerful. So I'm not particularly against her being on the list. She wouldn't be my choice, but I can appreciate her being there. Now, the Ferguson protesters, I think that what is going on in America in terms of these protests, and incidentally, I think they should change that not to the Ferguson protesters, but something like US civil rights protesters, or something that's a little bit more generic, to include, for example, the New York protesters. That, I think, would be more universal. I think Ferguson is a big issue in America, and it is a big news issue of 2014, but it's nevertheless an American issue as opposed to an international issue. Now, in my personal opinion, to be Time Magazine Person of the Year, it should be somebody who has an influence worldwide. And I appreciate it's an American magazine, but it's an American magazine that has always had a focus that it's focusing on world affairs, not just American affairs. It's not like, for example, the Canadian Newsmaker of the Year, because if that was the case, then Time should just rename themselves American of the Year or US Newsmaker of the Year. So that's something I'm somewhat skeptical about. The Ebola caregivers, I've no big problem with that. It is a generic group, and I mentioned that maybe they should have a separate category for Group of the Year, but these are, this would show the benevolence of human beings. It would be a very positive inclusion, and it would be people who obviously dedicate their lives to caring for others. I have no problem with those people being recognised. They're decent human beings, and they deserve to be recognised, but the only thing is they're not a person, they are a group of people. So if they're going to go down that line, they should maybe have a category Group of the Year. Putin, I'm no fan of Putin, but I have no problem with him being seen as the most influential person of the year, because Putin is enormously influential. He's the most powerful man in the world. I don't think many people dispute that. Forbes named him that. Forbes is very influential. I think no one can deny Putin has had a massive influence in the year 2014. So if Putin does get it, it would be his second time. He got it in 2007. I wouldn't have any issue with him getting it this year. And incidentally, people shouldn't confuse that with an endorsement. Um, the thing about Time Person of the Year, just to remind people, it's not an endorsement of the person. It's not saying the person is good or bad, or it's not a reflection on character. It's simply a reflection on influence. So Putin has a very strong claim. Taylor Swift, well, how they describe it, is one of the world's top-selling music artists who this year shook up the music industry by pulling her music from streaming service Spotify, which she believes should compensate artists more. I don't feel that's a particularly inspiring write-up. But like I say, I'm open-minded enough to accept that it shouldn't just be politicians and CEOs. Jack Ma, an English teacher turned founder and CEO of Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce giant which debuted a 25 billion IPO. Now, I can understand this. Usually I don't go for CEOs, but China is a rising superpower. Jack Ma is arguably the most influential Chinese businessman, so when you put those two facts together, maybe he's more influential than Xi Jinping in that sense. Tim Cook, well, he's the CEO of Apple. He happens to have come out as gay. Now, the thing about this is, on one hand, I respect him for staying true to himself. It certainly takes some degree of courage, but coming out these days is not exactly a revolutionary thing. So I'm not sure, they're sort of portraying it like it's a revolutionary thing. There are a lot of celebrities, frankly, that come out. If he was coming out in a small town in Kansas, it might be different. But in the world that he lives in, I don't think it's particularly revolutionary. So I'm sorry, but I don't think that is... it's different if someone is campaigning on gay rights, but simply coming out in its own right is not a revolutionary thing. If someone has dedicated their life to gay rights, that's quite different, and faced violence for something like that. But you know, he's being true to himself. That's great, but I don't think he's a gay icon. Masoud Barzani, the acting president of the Iraqi Kurdistan region. Well, this is an interesting one because he's certainly not among the best known people on the list. Certainly, if I have any Kurdish viewers, I'm sure you know who he is. But and I don't mean to be disrespectful in that regard. I'm just being honest. I don't think he is a well-recognized figure outside that community. However, certainly, I think they make a fair case for him. And given the threats that he has faced this year in terms of what his people has faced in terms of ISIS, I think it's a fair choice, actually. It would be an interesting one. I think basically, so long as they can justify their choice, then it shouldn't be an issue if the person isn't particularly famous. Roger Goodell, now this is the one person on the list that I would really take issue with. The National Football League Commissioner, whose leadership has been under great scrutiny this year as the league dealt with public incidents of domestic abuse by players such as Ray Rice, among other controversies. To me, again, this is a very much an internal American issue. Now, I'm not saying the issues aren't important. Domestic violence is a very serious problem, but simply the fact that he happens to be the commissioner at this time, to me that's more coincidence than anything else. I don't think that can be classed as worldwide influential. Plus, Roger Goodell, I mean, who knows this guy except people who follow the National Football League? I mean, I do take issue with that because, realistically, does he have a worldwide impact? No, I don't think he does. So if they choose him, and I don't think they will, but if they do, I think that would be a ridiculous choice. I am disappointed that Narendra Modi is not on the list, and I think that is quite ignorant of the Times staff to just leave him even off the finalists when he was at the very top of the readers' poll. Now, I'm not saying they have to be bullied into just choosing whatever the readers choose, but they should still take it into account. And the fact of the matter is he was at the top of the poll, so to completely leave him off is frankly a little bit, I think, a little bit arrogant. Some of those people on the list I would definitely agree with. Who would be my choice out of those people? Well, given that it is a person of the year, not a group of the year, I'd probably say Putin. and this is not an endorsement of Putin, believe me, I am no fan of Putin. I am no fan of Russian actions this year. But the fact of the matter is, Putin has shaken East-West relations. If I was to have a number 2 in that list, and I'm talking here about people as opposed to groups, maybe Jack Ma out of this list. So Putin or Jack Ma would be my choice of that list. The others, well, like I say, the Ebola caregivers, I'm very sympathetic to them, but I think that is a group. So it's just misleading to say Person of the Year, then have a generic group. Because what they should do, maybe, is do what the Nobel Committee does, have separate categories. So for example, they have the Nobel Peace Prize, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, etc. Well, why doesn't Time magazine, this is just a suggestion as a Time reader, why don't they have a Person of the Year, also a Group of the Year, and maybe an Event of the Year? So separate categories rather than sort of throwing in groups with individuals, because that is inconsistent. Oh, by the way, Joshua Wong, again, they didn't include him in their finalists. Now, if they would have a generic group, maybe they should have had the Hong Kong protesters. I don't know. But anyway, of those names, I would say Putin. And I would be very surprised if they choose Roger Goodall. I don't know the man, but I just don't think, based on their write-up, that merits being a Person of the Year. I mean, when you think about it, in an entire year, of all the events going on around the world, of all the pivotal events going on around the world, of all the politicians and CEOs, etc., really? A guy who happens to be commissioner of a sports team during a scandal, is that really a world-changing position to be in? I don't think so. So I really don't understand why they've included him on the list. But hey, everyone has their own opinions. It's just my view. Let me know your thoughts. So this is specifically about the finalists, not about the list in general, but about the finalists that I've just named. We will find out within the next 12 hours. I'll make a video concerning the winner and my thoughts on who the winner is. Thank you for watching.